When I opened the door and saw her standing there with 2 small suitcases and a forced smile, I felt my stomach twist in ways I hadn't imagined possible. I hadn't seen my younger sister, Naomi, in over 6 months. Her marriage had collapsed quietly, without the dramatic announcements you see on television or in the tabloids. It was whispered, subtle, and devastating. And now she was here, my home, my sanctuary, my space that had always felt like the one place I could breathe. I swallowed the knot in my throat, forcing a smile. "Naomi, come in. The kids too." I motioned toward the small hallway, where her 2 children clung to her skirts, wide-eyed and timid. My living room smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I'd burned that morning, and the morning sun fell soft across the hardwood floors, highlighting the tidy chaos of my life, a life I'd always prided myself on keeping balanced. "Yes, thank you," she said. Her voice was pitched just a little too high, anxious, rehearsed. I noticed the way her fingers drummed against the handles of her suitcases, a nervous rhythm that set my teeth on edge. I told myself it was natural. She had been through a lot. I had to be patient. I had always been patient. The children, Liam and Sophie, ran ahead, squealing as they explored the corners of my home, touching the soft throw on the couch, peeking into the kitchen where the coffee machine hissed. I smiled despite myself. This was the part one had loved about family. The unspoken joy in little things. I hugged Naomi briefly, sensing the tension behind her eyes. "You're so brave coming here like this," I whispered, unsure if it was courage or desperation. She looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. "I didn't have much choice," she said softly, then added, I hope it's okay. I won't be any trouble." The first evening was awkward but bearable. I cooked pasta for the children and myself, Naomi sitting silently across the table, picking at a salad she barely touched. Liam spilled sauce on the carpet, and Sophie's laughter echoed in the small kitchen, breaking the tension slightly. Naomi apologized for the mess, her voice brittle. I nodded. I told her it was fine. I smiled too much, I think. Over the next few days I tried to keep our routine. Work, school, meals, homework. The house was louder now. Yes, more chaotic, but also warmer in ways I hadn't expected. Naomi helped with the children. She did the laundry, folded the clothes neatly, even organized their tiny toys with precision that made me both grateful and slightly envious. I told myself it was just the right thing to do. Family first. Always. But then came the little things, the glances she threw my way, the way she lingered in rooms longer than necessary, the way she seemed to know exactly when to appear in my line of sight without making it obvious. I chalked it up to sisterly closeness. I had to. I needed to. I hadn't noticed how much Liam and Sophie had changed around her. They were quieter, more hesitant to speak their minds, waiting for Naomi's permission to do anything. I saw it in their eyes sometimes, the tiny pause before they spoke, the way their shoulders tensed. My chest tightened, but I told myself I was imagining things. And then there was the way my husband, Jason, began to look at her. Not openly, not with anything overt, but in those small fleeting moments, the way he lingered when she passed by the kitchen, the way his tone softened when he spoke to her. I tried to ignore it. I wanted to. I reminded myself he loved me, always had. But the house felt different now. Heavy. Not with the children's laughter, but with small, almost imperceptible shifts in energy. Naomi had settled in completely, claiming a corner of the living room with books, blankets, and a small plant she brought from her apartment. I let her. Of course I let her. She was family. She was my sister. I was exhausted one night after work. I collapsed on the couch, the scent of vanilla from the candle mixing with the faint smell of laundry detergent. Naomi was sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping Liam with his math homework. Sophie was drawing quietly beside them, and I realized with a chill I couldn't explain, that she had been here for almost 3 weeks, fully embedded in our lives. I had barely noticed the small ways she had rearranged the furniture, shifted routines, inserted herself into every aspect of our days. I told myself again, family first. Everything else came second. But late that night, as I washed dishes alone in the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of something on my husband's phone lying on the counter. A message notification from Naomi. I didn't look immediately. I told myself it was nothing. A question about the children probably. But curiosity gnawed at me. Eventually I glanced. Just a small line of text. "Don't worry. I've got this. Everything will work out." I froze. My hands trembled on the dish I was holding. Everything will work out. For whom? I told myself it was innocent. I told myself she was helping manage the chaos. My imagination ran ahead, conjuring scenarios I didn't want to consider. And yet, a cold seed had been planted. The next day, I watched her interact with the children. She was perfect. She laughed, she comforted, she cooked breakfast. She reminded Liam to do his homework. The children adored her. And I adored her still. Or at least I thought I did. But the unease never left. I found myself double-checking texts, questioning glances, overthinking moments that once would have passed unnoticed. I tried to tell myself it was paranoia. That's all it was. But the seed had grown roots. One evening, Naomi and I sat together, sorting through a pile of children's clothes. The air smelled faintly of the soap I used on their small socks. She hummed softly as she folded tiny shirts, her movements deliberate and slow. She glanced up at me, a small, knowing smile curving her lips. "You've been tense, you know," she said quietly. "I'm fine," I murmured, avoiding her eyes. "No," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're not. I can feel it." I swallowed hard, the tension in my shoulders tightening. I didn't answer. I couldn't. And I realized in that quiet moment that something had changed. Something fundamental. Something I hadn't yet named. The calm before the storm. A few days later, I began noticing the little changes that, in hindsight, should have screamed warning. Naomi started making decisions about the household without asking me. She rearranged furniture, changed the children's bedtime routines, even decided what groceries we would buy. First, I told myself it was fine. She was helping. She was family. But the subtle way she would smile when Jason agreed with her suggestions, the way she lingered just a little too long near him when she asked a question, it started to gnaw at me. It was a Thursday morning when the first real suspicion planted itself in my mind. Jason had left his phone on the counter while he showered. Normally, I would have ignored it, respected his privacy. But something in me, a small uneasy voice, made me glance. I tried not to breathe too loudly, my heart thudding as if it had sensed the betrayal before I did. A string of messages flashed on the screen, Naomi's name highlighted in bold. I couldn't bring myself to read them. Not yet. I set the phone down, forcing a deep breath. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was just mundane chatter about the kids or the laundry or some trivial coordination. But that tiny seed of unease had taken root, and I could no longer ignore the way my stomach churned every time Naomi and Jason shared a quiet conversation in the kitchen or over coffee. Over the next week, the tension grew. I started noticing the looks, the quiet laughter that stopped abruptly when I walked into the room. Naomi's smile, once warm and disarming, began to feel strategic. And every time Jason glanced her way, there was a flicker of something I couldn't name. Approval, admiration, complicity. I told myself it was paranoia. I clung to that because the alternative was unbearable. The real turning point came one rainy Saturday afternoon. The kind of gray day that seeps into your bones. The children were playing quietly in their rooms while Naomi and I were folding laundry in the living room. She hummed softly, sorting socks with meticulous care. I watched her from across the room, feeling an inexplicable tension in my chest. "You look tired," she said suddenly, glancing up with a softness I hadn't felt in weeks. "I'm fine," I replied automatically, though my throat burned. She tilted her head, studying me. "I think you should talk to him. About everything." I froze. "Talk to who?" "Jason." My voice was tight, defensive. She nodded, almost innocently. "About how things have been between you two. He's worried about you." I laughed nervously, shaking my head. "We're fine, Naomi. Really. I don't need advice." Her eyes softened, but there was something calculating behind them. Something deliberate. I didn't trust myself to confront her then, not yet. I couldn't explain why, but I felt that quiet, gnawing unease again. That night, I went to bed with the rain tapping against the window and a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake. Sleep eluded me. I kept seeing small scenes over and over. Naomi smiling while Jason nodded at her suggestions. Naomi brushing Liam's hair while Jason's gaze lingered. Naomi handing Sophie a plate of food while I was still in the kitchen. Little, innocent moments, or so they appeared, but something beneath them felt deliberate, orchestrated. The next morning, I decided to test my intuition. I asked Jason to help me move some boxes into the attic. He agreed, but as we worked, I tried to observe him subtly. His laughter was too easy when Naomi appeared to drop off laundry, his tone softening, almost deferential. It hit me with a jolt of clarity. Naomi wasn't just helping. She was positioning herself. Strategically. I told myself I needed proof. I needed something concrete before I could confront either of them. My mind raced, planning, observing. I began keeping small notes in my phone, snippets of conversation, times, gestures. Nothing overt. Just evidence of the way the dynamics had shifted. Then, one evening, the unthinkable happened. Naomi asked if she could speak to me privately. My chest sank. She led me into the kitchen, the rain still tapping against the windows, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. She closed the door gently behind us, her eyes serious yet deceptively calm. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. My stomach turned. "I didn't come here just to help you. I've been supporting Jason in the discussions he's been having about the house and the finances." I blinked, my mind trying to catch up. What do you mean?" She sighed, almost sympathetically. "I'm on his side. We've agreed that this is best." I felt the floor shift beneath me. My voice caught in my throat. "Naomi, what are you saying?" "I'm saying, I'm helping him make decisions without conflict. I didn't want to hurt you." Her tone was measured, careful, almost rehearsed. I stared at her, the fluorescent light above the kitchen flickering slightly. The air felt heavy, thick with betrayal. My sister, my own flesh and blood, had taken sides. My heart pounded, my hands trembling. And then, slowly, deliberately, she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Thick, official-looking. My name written clearly across the front. I felt my knees weaken before I could stop it. "Naomi, what is that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She placed it on the counter, her fingers lingering lightly, almost tenderly. "It's for you," she said. "From Jason." My hand shook as I picked it up. The weight of it seemed to press down on my chest before I even opened it. My breath caught. The words inside were blunt, legal, cold. "Divorce papers. Signed, filed, served." And the date today. I dropped the envelope as if it had burned me. My body shook. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, to hit something. But I couldn't. Naomi's eyes were steady, almost sad but devoid of remorse. "I thought I could trust you," I managed, my voice breaking. "I thought I was helping you," she said simply. "I did what I thought was best for everyone." The room spun around me. The rain tapped harder against the window. The children's laughter from the other room sounded distant, almost unreal. The house that had once been my sanctuary now felt like a trap. The betrayal was so complete, so personal, so intimate that it left me numb, shaking, and utterly alone in a crowd of familiar faces. I sank into the kitchen chair, my hands covering my face, trying to process the impossible. My sister, my husband, my life, everything I had built, everything I had believed was safe, was gone in a few quiet, deliberate motions. And in that silence, broken only by the rain and the hum of the refrigerator, I realized something terrifying. I had no idea how far this betrayal would go, or how I would respond. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. I stayed in the kitchen for what felt like hours, staring at the divorce papers as if they could explain themselves. The storm outside had worsened, rain thrumming against the windows like a relentless heartbeat. I could hear the children playing, laughing, oblivious to the world-shattering event that had just occurred in the room next door. My chest ached with betrayal so sharp it made my limbs heavy, almost paralyzed. Finally, I pushed myself up from the chair. The envelope crumpled in my hand. I had to see him, Jason. I needed answers, although I suspected the truth would hurt more than anything I could imagine. I found him in the den, his back to me, staring at the muted TV screen. "Jason," I said, voice trembling but low. He didn't turn immediately. "Jason, what is this?" He finally looked at me, and I swear the moment our eyes met, the years of trust, love, and shared life seemed to collapse between us. His shoulders sagged slightly, the familiar warmth in his eyes replaced with an almost clinical detachment. I thought it would be easier this way, he said quietly. Easier. I repeated, my voice rising despite my effort. You call destroying our marriage easier? And Naomi, my sister? You both? My voice broke and I swallowed the scream I wanted to let out. Jason didn't respond immediately. He ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. She's been helping me mediating. We thought it would be best for everyone. Best for everyone? I laughed bitterly, a hollow, empty sound. You mean for you two, yes? You mean that you both conspired behind my back while I offered my home, my heart, my trust? Is that what best means? He flinched at the words but didn't answer. I wanted to hit him, scream, cry, everything at once. But I didn't. I was too stunned, too hollowed out by the betrayal to act. I left the room quietly, not wanting the children to hear. I needed space to think, to process, to decide if I had the strength to confront Naomi directly. But even as I walked past the living room, I caught sight of her. She was sitting cross-legged on the sofa, Liam leaning against her side, Sophie tucked on her other side. She looked calm, almost serene, the picture of normalcy. But underneath that, I could see the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes, subtle but unmistakable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the world apart and see them punished for the cruelty of their deceit. But I couldn't, not yet. I needed evidence, proof beyond my gut, beyond the crushing weight of betrayal. Over the next few days, I began to observe everything with meticulous attention. Every glance, every text, every whispered word between Jason and Naomi became part of a map I was drawing in my mind. The children remained oblivious, their innocence both a comfort and a torment. They made the house feel alive, yet each laugh, each game reminded me of the life I had lost, or the life that was being stolen from me. One afternoon I found Naomi in the kitchen, stacking plates neatly into the cupboard. She smiled at me, casual, disarming. "Tea?" she asked. I nodded mutely, my throat tight. "Sure." She moved with a grace I had always envied. There was a quiet efficiency to her movements, a precision that spoke of control, subtle but absolute. And it hit me again. Everything she did was deliberate. Every smile, every gentle word, every act of help. It was calculated. I decided I couldn't stay passive any longer. If they thought they could manipulate me, they were mistaken. I began small, gathering documents, saving text messages, recording minor admissions where possible. I kept everything secret, my heart hammering every time I thought about what I was doing. And then came the day I confronted Naomi. She was folding Sophie's school uniform when I entered the room. The rain had let up, and the late afternoon sun spilled through the windows, casting a warm glow over the scene. I held a printed copy of her message to Jason, the one that said, "Don't worry. I've got this. Everything will work out." "Naomi," I said, voice tight, measured. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Yes," she replied, calm. "This," I said, placing the paper on the counter, "is what I found." Her eyes flickered, not with fear, but with that same controlled calm. "I see," she said softly. "You've been manipulating everything. The children, the house, Jason. Me. You came here pretending to be helpless, to need me, and all along you were conspiring against me." I could feel my face flush with rage, my hands trembling. She tilted her head slightly, the faintest trace of a smile playing at her lips. "I did what I had to. You were so consumed with everything else. You weren't seeing what needed to be done. I helped because I knew no one else would." "Helped?" I spat the word out. "You call betrayal help?" She shrugged, calm, almost placid. "Sometimes helping someone means doing what they cannot see, even if they think they hate you for it." I stared at her, my mind reeling. The room seemed smaller, tighter, claustrophobic. The anger, the heartbreak, the disbelief. It all churned inside me. A storm as violent as the one that had raged outside when the divorce papers arrived. You can't get away with this," I said, voice low but firm. "I won't let you." She nodded once, serene. "We'll see." And at that moment I realized, I wasn't just fighting Naomi. I wasn't just fighting Jason. I was fighting the betrayal itself, the invisible poison that had seeped into my home and my life. And I would not lose. The days that followed were a blur of strategy, silent observation, and careful maneuvering. I couldn't let my emotions dictate my actions, not now. Naomi and Jason were clever, patient, and precise. but I had something they underestimated. I understood the heart of my home, the rhythm of our family, and the subtle cracks in their alliance. I started small, leaving subtle reminders of my presence, little touches that marked the space as mine. A favorite blanket on the couch folded differently. A picture frame nudged slightly to the left. The children's toys subtly reorganized. Nothing overt, but enough to remind them that this house wasn't theirs to command. Naomi noticed, of course. Her eyes flickered each time she saw a change, but she said nothing. I didn't want her to. I wanted her to realize that I wasn't passive, that the walls she thought she controlled still belonged to me. Jason, meanwhile, became more distant. Perhaps he sensed the shift, or perhaps he was growing wary of Naomi's influence. He avoided eye contact more often, lingered in work calls, and stopped asking Naomi for opinions on every trivial household matter. I could feel the tension between them growing, and I waited, patient, careful, gathering ammunition for the moment when confrontation would be unavoidable. And then one evening Naomi overstepped. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner. The faint aroma of garlic and onion filled the air. She entered with Sophie trailing behind her, a plate in hand. "I thought I'd help with dinner tonight," she said brightly. I froze mid-chop. "This is my kitchen," I said quietly but firmly. "I decide what we eat." Her smile faltered slightly, the first crack in her calm facade. I was just trying to help. The children were hungry, and I thought. Thought what? I cut in, setting the knife down. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anger, disbelief, and the weight of months of manipulation. That you could take over my home? My life? Naomi's eyes narrowed, but she recovered quickly, her voice cool. I didn't take over. I just stepped in where you couldn't see. Where I couldn't see? I repeated, disbelief lacing every word. Naomi, this isn't about seeing. This is about respect. About trust. About not turning my life into your playground. Sophie's small voice piped up from behind her mother. "Mommy, please don't fight." The word hit me like a knife. I bent down, meeting Sophie's eyes. "I'm not fighting, sweetheart. I'm just correcting something that shouldn't have happened." I straightened, taking a deep breath. "Naomi, I need you to leave the kitchen. Now." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She gave a slight nod and moved to the living room, her calm veneer intact, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. I knew then that the balance of power had shifted. She could manipulate, deceive, and charm, but she couldn't control me. Not fully. That night I made a decision. I would confront Jason first, not in anger but in truth. I needed clarity. The rain had returned, a light drizzle tapping against the windows as I found him in the den, staring blankly at the muted television again. "Jason," I said softly, standing in the doorway. He looked up, weary, almost defeated. "We need to talk. About everything." He gestured for me to sit, his eyes avoiding mine. "I know," he murmured. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I know about your conversations with Naomi. I know about the planning, the positioning, the manipulation. I've seen it all. And I need to know why." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I thought it was for the best. Things had been difficult between us for a while. Naomi, she was helping me make decisions that would prevent further conflict. I didn't mean for it to hurt you." "Not mean to hurt me?" I repeated, incredulous. "Jason, she served me divorce papers in my own home. How is that anything but hurt?" He flinched, a small guilty gesture. "I know. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if things stayed calm, if she helped mediate, it would be easier for everyone." "Easier?" I whispered, shaking my head. "Easier for you. Not me. Not the children. Not my home, my trust, my life." He looked down, silent, and I felt the full weight of the betrayal, the depth of the fracture between us. I realized then that the house, my home, was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battlefield, and every small action, every whispered word, was a maneuver in a war I hadn't fully understood until now. I left him sitting there, eyes cast downward, and walked slowly to the living room. Naomi was there, sitting with the children, pretending to read a story. I could feel the anger simmering beneath my skin, But I held it back, calculating, precise. This confrontation would not be about screams or tears. It would be about truth, about exposure, about reclaiming my life. I cleared my throat, making my presence known. Naomi looked up, her expression calm but wary. I pulled out the folder where I had been keeping a meticulous record of messages, conversations, and evidence. I placed it in front of her. "I've been keeping track," I said quietly. "Every message, every interaction, every attempt to manipulate this family. I have it all here. And now it's time for the truth to come out." Her eyes flickered just slightly, but she said nothing. The children shifted uneasily on the couch, sensing the tension but not understanding it. I took a deep breath, the storm outside echoing the turmoil inside. This house, this family, this life, it is mine. Not yours, not Jason's. And I will not let betrayal take it from me. And for the first time since the divorce papers arrived, I felt a small flicker of power, a sense of control returning. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But I had taken the first step toward reclaiming what was mine. Naomi's face tightened as she looked at the folder. She didn't touch it. Her hands stayed clasped neatly in her lap, the way someone sits when they know they're being watched. "You went through my phone?" she asked quietly. I almost laughed. "Your phone? Naomi, you used my Wi-Fi, my printer, my guest room, my kitchen table. You left trails everywhere. You didn't even bother to hide them." Her lips parted slightly, a breath caught between fear and defiance. "I was trying to survive, Elena. You know what it's like starting over with 2 kids, no job, no support. I needed stability." I nodded slowly. "So you found it in my husband?" That struck her. She blinked, eyes glistening for a moment before she looked away. "It wasn't about him," she whispered. "It was about me. You've always had everything under control. Your family, your marriage, your home. You never needed anyone. I was drowning and you didn't even notice." Her words hit harder than I expected. Because in a small way she wasn't wrong. I had built my life on competence, structure, and quiet pride. I'd offered her a roof, meals, stability, but not presence. I hadn't noticed her loneliness. I'd only noticed my charity. But that truth didn't excuse her betrayal. So instead of asking for help, I said, my voice calm but cold, "You aligned yourself with the one person who could destroy everything I built." Her jaw tightened. "Jason said you were done with him. That you'd already emotionally checked out." I shook my head slowly, almost pitying. "He said what he needed to say to feel less guilty. And you believed him because it made your actions easier to justify." Silence filled the room. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock, steady, accusing. The children had retreated upstairs. Even they sensed something sacred and dangerous was unraveling below. Jason appeared in the doorway, watching us. His face was pale, drawn. "Naomi," he said quietly, "you should go upstairs." She turned sharply. "No. You don't get to silence me now." He sighed heavily, rubbing his forehead. "This isn't helping anyone." I turned to him. "No, Jason. It's helping me. For once, it's helping me understand exactly how far this went." He didn't respond, only sank into the armchair, the weight of the situation finally pressing him down. Naomi's voice trembled. "You don't understand what it was like for me. Watching you live the life I could never have. You married stability. I married chaos. When it all fell apart, you opened your home but not your heart. You looked at me like a project, not a sister." Her words were a knife, but this time the cut didn't bleed. It cauterized. I saw her clearly for the first time, not as a victim, not as a villain, but as a woman who mistook envy for justice. "You could have asked for love," I said quietly. "Instead you chose power." She turned toward the door, eyes flashing. "Maybe power was the only thing you ever respected." And then she walked out. Up the stairs, down the hall, her steps sharp and deliberate. Jason exhaled, a low, exhausted sound. "She's leaving tomorrow," he murmured. "Good," I replied. "But you're not staying either." His head snapped up. "What?" I looked him straight in the eye. "You heard me. The papers are signed, the decision's made. I can't unsee what I've seen, Jason. I won't live with someone who lets betrayal sit at the dinner table." He swallowed hard, the muscles in his jaw working. "So that's it." "That's it," I said simply. "You can go wherever you want. But this house, this family, what's left of it, stays with me. He stood, looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. You always were stronger than me. Not stronger, I corrected. Just done pretending not to be. He left the room. The echo of the front door closing felt final. I stood alone in the quiet. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and rain. The storm outside had slowed to a drizzle, small drops racing down the windowpane like tears that refused to stop halfway. I thought I'd feel relief. But what I felt was something else. A vast aching emptiness. For weeks afterward, the house was too still. The mornings felt hollow without the noise of children, without Naomi's forced cheer, without Jason's silent guilt. I'd walk through the hall and feel the ghosts of every conversation replaying against the walls. But slowly life adjusted. I fixed the kitchen that had felt invaded. I painted over the scuffed handprints in the hallway. I rearranged the furniture, reclaiming each corner as mine again. The smallest acts, hanging a curtain, lighting a candle, making coffee for one, became declarations of survival. It wasn't healing yet, but it was movement. Then one afternoon, as I was sorting through old mail, I found a note tucked behind a drawer in Naomi's room. It was crumpled, unfinished, written in her neat handwriting. Elena, if you ever find this, I need you to know I didn't mean to destroy you. I just wanted to be seen. You gave me everything but left me invisible in your shadow. I thought taking something from you would make me feel alive again. It didn't. It just made me smaller. I read it twice, then folded it carefully. There was no satisfaction in that note, only sadness. And yet it closed something inside me. Because in her own way, Naomi had confessed. Not to the world, not to Jason, but to me. That night, I lit a candle by the window. The same window where I had once stood watching the rain the day the papers arrived. The flame flickered gently, steady against the darkness. I whispered to the empty room. You didn't destroy me, Naomi. You just reminded me that love without boundaries isn't love at all. The days turned into weeks and gradually, the house stopped feeling like a battlefield. The air no longer carried the tension of secrets, whispers, and divided loyalties. I still felt the ache of betrayal, but it was tempered by the quiet strength that came from taking control back. I began small routines, morning coffee by the window, journaling late at night, cooking meals without distraction. Each action was deliberate, a small act of reclaiming what had been taken from me emotionally. The children visited on weekends with Naomi, but only under structured circumstances. I allowed them in my space, but I kept a distance. No more blurred lines, no more manipulation disguised as family care. One Saturday morning, as the sun spilled golden light across the hardwood floors, I found myself sitting in the living room, a stack of photographs on my lap. Old family albums, snapshots of birthdays, holidays, little moments I had tucked away in boxes, now resurfacing. I smiled softly at the memories, allowing them to fill the quiet spaces of the home with warmth. It was then that Jason called. I answered cautiously, the phone pressed against my ear like a shield. Elena, he said, voice low. I've moved out of my apartment. I needed space. I need to figure things out. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. I see. You're making the right choice, Jason. I hope you find clarity. Will you forgive me? He asked hesitantly. I paused. Forgiveness wasn't about absolution. It was about freeing myself from the weight of his betrayal. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I can release the anger. That's what matters now, for me. He sighed, a long, heavy sound. Thank you for your honesty. Take care, Jason. I hung up before my voice could crack. With him gone, the house felt lighter. The absence of deceit, manipulation, and emotional games allowed space for genuine reflection. I spent the following weeks reconnecting with friends I had neglected, organizing my work, and finding time to simply breathe. Then, one evening, Naomi returned the children after their weekend visit. She had changed, no longer the calculated, poised figure who had once handed me betrayal on a silver platter. She approached me quietly, placing Sophie and Liam's backpacks down. Elena, she began, voice soft, I wanted to apologize. Not for everything. I can't undo it. But for the way I used you. For putting you through that. I studied her, seeing her not as a sister who had betrayed me, but as a human being who had acted out of fear, envy, and insecurity. I nodded, accepting her apology silently. Words weren't necessary. Acknowledgement was enough. The children ran ahead, laughing, chasing each other through the hallway. Their joy reminded me that family isn't just built on perfect actions. It's built on resilience, care, and shared history, even when human flaws complicate it. I felt a shift within me. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant understanding, reclaiming power, and drawing boundaries. I had done that. I had survived the betrayal, faced the manipulation, and come out intact. Stronger. Weeks later, I found myself preparing a small dinner alone. The aroma of roasted chicken filled the kitchen, mingling with the faint scent of vanilla from a candle on the counter. I poured myself a glass of wine, raised it to the empty room, and whispered, "To life, to truth, to me." I sat back, watching the sunset through the window. The light spilled across the room, golden and forgiving. In that moment, I understood that healing was less about what had happened and more about how I chose to move forward. I began journaling again, not about anger or betrayal, but about gratitude, growth, and the small victories of reclaimed life. I found joy in quiet mornings, laughter in my children's voices, and solace in the knowledge that boundaries and honesty were my armor now. The final lesson crystallized slowly, unshakable. Love is not measured by sacrifice alone, nor by tolerance of betrayal. Love is measured by respect, honesty, and the courage to reclaim oneself when deception infiltrates the heart. I realized I had grown beyond the pain, beyond the manipulation. I had emerged wiser, stronger, and more attuned to the people who truly mattered in my life. The house had settled into a calm rhythm again. Evenings were quieter now, but the quiet was peaceful, not loaded with tension. I found myself lingering in the kitchen longer than usual, savoring the smell of fresh bread and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Every corner of the house felt like a reminder that I had survived, that I had reclaimed my life from the people who sought to take it from me. I often thought about Naomi, about the choices she made, the way she justified betrayal to herself. And I realized something crucial. Our lives were no longer entwined in the destructive ways they had been. I could care for her children, offer guidance, and still protect my own peace. Boundaries didn't mean hatred, they meant survival. Sometimes, late at night, I would hear the faint sound of rain tapping against the window, the same rhythm that had accompanied so many of my fears and frustrations. I would sit by the candle, journal in hand, reflecting on the lessons learned, the importance of seeing people clearly, the danger of envy disguised as need, the necessity of protecting oneself even from those we love most. I had rebuilt trust in myself. I had confronted betrayal, reclaimed my home, and created a space where honesty, not manipulation, governed the family dynamics. My heart still ached for the love that had been lost, the relationships that had fractured, but it was tempered by the knowledge that pain could be transformed into strength. Life, I realized, was rarely about perfection. It was about perseverance, about choosing dignity over anger, clarity over chaos, and truth over convenience. And so I moved forward. I reconnected with old friends, re-established routines, and welcomed small joys into my life. I let laughter fill the hallways again. I let the children run freely when they visited. I let myself breathe. At the same time, I carried the experience with me, not as a scar but as a map of survival. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every manipulated smile had taught me something vital about human nature, about trust, about resilience. And those lessons would guide me for the rest of my life. I often ask myself, reflecting on those months, on that storm of deceit and manipulation, how I could have felt so powerless and yet found so much strength. And I realize the answer lies not in the actions of others, but in the choices we make when faced with them. I chose myself. I chose boundaries. I chose truth. And in doing so, I reclaimed not only my home, but my sense of self. So, to you watching this story, I leave one question. When someone you trust betrays you, when your safe space is invaded, when the people you love choose power over loyalty, what would you do? Would you forgive, fight, or simply reclaim your life? Because at the end of the day, the answer is yours, and the strength you find within yourself will define the story you live next.